Let's change gears. I want to talk about two more countries. This is getting a little bit out of the developed world and into some spicier international markets. One of which being Brazil. Brazil's been a controversial one here in recent years. What's your thoughts on that country right now?
So interesting. They just cut rates. They had their rate decision on Wednesday night, I want to say, Wednesday evening for you in the US. So their rate is, I think, now at 13%, 13 odd percent. And they cut rates by 50 basis points. They were supposed to cut rates by 25, but they cut it by 50. So people were a little surprised at how aggressive they were at cutting rates. But their policies, like the policies that they talked about, on the other hand, they talked about, keeping rates high. So even though they're cutting, they're not going to go back to the 5-6% rate. What they are trying to say is that we do believe there will be more rate cuts this year for them, but I think they will still keep them at a sufficiently restricted level, as the central bankers like to put it, right? So I think their rates might settle somewhere around 8-9%. They've done well on inflation, very well on inflation. And some commodity prices going up is actually good for them as well. But with Brazil, I think there are two things that I would like to point out. One is these effects of El Nino, so the weather effects. That affects their country a lot because they do have, commodity supplies. So that's something that we need to keep an eye on. The second thing is obviously oil prices. And I talk about oil prices because the largest holding in their ETF, in the Brazilian ETF that we use, EWZ, is it EWZ? I think so. That one, the biggest holding is Petrobras. And Petrobras is the biggest oil company for them, right? The state oil company. So it moves a lot with oil prices. So that's something that we need to keep an eye on as well. So sometimes, like for example, they cut rates, but the ETF itself fell because oil prices were down that day. So something to just keep in mind when you're investing in Brazil or through these ETFs.
I do want to ask you one more thing about Brazil, Ayesha. I know that you have a banking background, and Brazil's financial services industry or sector is kind of fascinating to me. It's been so regulated, and you've just had these mega banks for so many decades. It seems like there's a push, at least from a lot of companies, to kind of democratize banking, right? You see the new banks out there, the Mercado Libres out there, the StoneCos. They want to make it more accessible for the mass population. Do you have thoughts on this transition? Is this going well for Brazil, or are there kind of growing pains? What are your thoughts on financial services?
So I think there are growing pains, obviously, and they are not probably going to go mass scale like, developed countries. I think with these kind of countries in general, not just Brazil, politics matters a lot. Obviously, they brought back their old leader, and he has his own ideas, but my understanding is he's trying to be a man of the people. So he might actually open up these policies a lot more than, the previous president. So I think, as you rightly pointed out, the regulations are very important here, right? So it's not for lack of people wanting it, and it's not for lack of people trying to open these kind of businesses. I think it's all got to do with regulations. I know from personal experience, emerging markets always have tighter regulations on the banking sector because of foreign currency reserves, right? We can't have free flow of money in and out of the country because we need to make sure that foreign currency reserves are kept at a certain level. With Brazil, it's easier. They do have a lot of foreign currency reserves compared to most other emerging markets. But at the same time, it's still a weaker currency in many respects, and they still need to make sure that there is some regulation around the free flow of, international money.